Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Corinne Salcedo, Chair of Fidalgo Democrats. Welcome to our third Zoom meeting. This time it will be on ranked choice voting with Lisa A. Rowe, Director of Fair Vote Washington, and two of her colleagues, Mohit Nair and Kit Millman. Our Zoom host is Brad Kleur of Skagit County Democrats Zoom support team. He'll be joined by Jeremy Harrison Smith on support. They will handle the muting and unmuting, etc. Everyone is muted now to eliminate background noise. Brad will unmute you when it's your time to speak. The meeting will be recorded, and our videographer, Zane Butler, will make a YouTube video of it, and I'll send out a link to the video when I receive it, with our Fidalgo Dems news bulletin attached, as usual. The program will also be on KSDR radio from Skagit Valley College. Please hold your questions until the question comment period. For simplicity, we'll have just one method of asking questions, which will be raising your hand. I'll explain how you do that when we get there. Before we go to our main program, a candidate would like to introduce herself. She is Court Commissioner Heather Shand Perkins. She may have up to 5 minutes, but we won't be taking time for questions. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight. It's such nice to meet you all by this Zoom platform. My name is Heather Shand Perkins, as Corinne said. I am the current Court Commissioner in Skagit County Superior Court. I was appointed to that position by the current judges, Brian Stiles, Laura Gomez, David Severin, and Dave Needy. I became the Court Commissioner after 20 years in private practice, where I had a lot of support from my fellow judicial officers and other attorneys. I began the process of becoming a judicial officer in 2017 when I began serving as a pro tem commissioner in Superior Court and in pro tem judge in District Court. That allowed me some opportunity to learn before I took the bench in September of 2019, and now I'm serving as the Court Commissioner. As your current Court Commissioner, I believe that I have the experience necessary to transition to the position of a judicial officer as your judge in Skagit County Superior Court. I come from a family who has dedicated their lives to public service. My grandfathers were both military members. My father was a military member, and he served for 30 years in the Washington State Patrol, followed by 10 years with the Skagit County Sheriff's Office, and he continues to serve as Hospital Commissioner of Skagit County Hospital District. I was raised in Skagit County. I was excited to return here after going to college at University of Washington and law school at Gonzaga University. I did some civil work in Seattle before I returned home to start a family and open a practice. When I came here to open my practice in 2005, I immediately began joining service groups and giving back to my community. I truly believe in service above self. I have been involved in the Skagit Rotary Club since 2007. I served as their scholarship chair, and I still serve as their scholarship chair. I see my role as a judicial officer as a leader in our legal community and our community as a whole. Someone who works with local government, law enforcement, attorneys, and organizations to ensure the legal system is advancing with our community and the issues that community face. As a single mother, I see my role as a woman and mentor just to be paramount as I expose my soon-to-be 13-year-old daughter. I can't believe she's a teenager already. Time does fly. They tell you that when you're having kids, but you don't believe it. Really teaching her how to be a servant to the community, something that I've dedicated myself to, my family has dedicated ourselves to. During my 20 years as a private practitioner, I really strived to advocate for my clients with compassion. And as a judicial officer, serving as the current court commissioner, I strive to continue that compassion on the bench, seeing all individuals who appear before me as an individual, not as a number, not as a single document piece of paper in front of me. Litigants deserve to see a judicial officer and judge who they can relate to, someone who genuinely takes an interest in them as an individual and works with them to create a pathway of hope to help them not become a number and statistic inside of the judicial system. I believe I have the experience, knowledge, compassion, and commitment that has prepared me to serve as the next Skagit County Superior Court. I appreciate so much the opportunity to come see you all today and learn about your organization. And I would be welcome to talk to any of you or meet with you one-on-one or in group sessions to discuss myself and my vision and my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, now I'll introduce Lisa A. Rowe, and she will introduce her two colleagues. Lisa lives in Kirkland. She's been director of Faribault, Washington for 2 years. Prior to Faribault, Washington, she was a math teacher and school administrator. Lisa developed an interest in voting methods while teaching a lesson to her middle school students about mathematics of voting. She has a BA in philosophy from Stanford. Living under a military dictatorship in Niger while serving as a Peace Corps volunteer impressed upon Lisa the imperative to be an active steward of democracy. Lisa, you can take it from there.
Thank you so much, Corrine, and what a pleasure it is to be here with all of you. You sound like a delightful group. I think I would enjoy spending more time with all of you. I am really glad to be able to have two of my colleagues joining me tonight. Actually, before I introduce them, I did just want to acknowledge that several of you are coming back for a repeat performance. We're very grateful to have you back, and I think pretty soon we're just going to hand the reins right over to Carol Sullivan, who I think has seen our presentation more than anybody else. Thank you for coming back, and all of you who've been here before. So let's see. Let's start with Kit. Kit Muehlman is one of our just stalwart volunteers in the Bellingham area. She has single-handedly been responsible for bringing more than 700 people into our organization, out at farmers markets and fairs and festivals, talking to people about ranked choice voting. She's passionate, and I'll let her say a couple of things. You'll get it right away. Kit, could you say a few more words about how you found your way here?
Yes, I'll be glad to. I didn't sign up all of those people all by myself. We have a great team in Bellingham. So it was 2016 when the political polarity and the conflict in this country were so upsetting I couldn't sleep. And I've never been drawn to anything political before, but now I feel a need to contribute to a positive systemic change. I am a yoga teacher and an elementary art teacher. I worked in La Conner at the Museum of Northwest Art for many years. And so, but ranked choice voting is what I'm working on now. It's the most practical, realistic, and far-reaching reform I know. And the news is still upsetting, but this work gives me hope, and I'm sleeping much better.
That's wonderful, Kit. Thank you so much. And my colleague Mohit Nair arrived in this country. Well, he did his studies in this country, so you'll get that. He's not totally brand new to the U.S., but he really re-arrived just in November. Got married to my daughter's very best friend from grade school, and I was glad to cross paths with him. He began volunteering with us, and soon after, we were really fortunate to be able to hire him as our partnerships director, and I'll let him say a few words of introduction too. Mohit?
Thanks so much, Lisa, and thank you to all of you for having us today. My name is Mohit, as Lisa mentioned. It's a pleasure to be with Faribault, Washington. My background's actually in public health. I did my sort of undergrad in biology and my master's in public health, and I was always chasing that sort of elusive concept of where to have the most impact, and that's kind of what led me to electoral reform. In terms of my background, I've spent a lot of time. I grew up in India. I also grew up in Japan, spent about 10 years there. So I've been blessed to experience really a multitude of different democratic forms of government. And I'm really excited to be working towards ranked choice voting here in Washington. So thanks for having us.
Good. And Brad, I should have asked you sooner. May I have permission to share my screen, please? See if he can do that. There you go. Okay. So folks, we've got a presentation that's about, are you seeing that? Right, great. About half an hour, maybe a little bit less if we can be crisp. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And Corinne, I think, has suggested that you raise hands if you'd like to say something. I think sometimes we use the chat window, but you prefer to do the raise hand. Is that right, Corinne?
That's right, right,
okay.
Right.
So in that case, I think that since we won't know the nature of the question, if I could just ask you, please go right ahead and raise your hand if what you have is a clarifying question, something that we've just said that is just not clear, and you think it would be best to address it in the moment, and then we'll try to be sure to notice that and call on you. That's just fine. And just know that we will have plenty of time for questions and afterwards at the end. Okay. So I want to just begin with, what did I just do? Oh, you know what? I've just lost you all, actually. You can all still see me, I assume.
Yes.
Yes.
I've never done this before, but I've somehow lost all of your visuals. I clicked accidentally up there at the top. I wonder if, well, I mean, I can
Click on.
go blind, but does anybody know how to fix that?
Yes.
Oops,
Hit
excuse
the
me.
hit the Alt key and then the Tab key.
Oh, thank you. Alt tab and it'll come back.
And then the Tab key.
Oh,
Is
that's
it back?
interesting. No, it's not back. You're not back.
No.
Well, we'll just I just can't see any of the usual dashboard now, which is a little bit odd, having done dozens and dozens of these. I don't know what I've done, but let's just go forward, and it'll be just like when I do a webinar and I can't see you anyway. Does that sound okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
And if anybody can think of any good advice for me to get you back, I'm really not quite sure. I suppose well, let's just go ahead. So Fair Vote Washington, we are a nonpartisan champion of electoral reforms that give voters more choices, a stronger voice, and a more representative democracy. And I think that's good enough. Justin Amash was, threw his hat in the ring. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm just going to have to stop here because I can tell that this is a little bit throwing me off. Okay, let me just try screen sharing one more time. I can see you all again. I must have done something a little unusual there. Let me just try this one more time. It's funny, and I can't see you again.
Brad, isn't there another key she can hit? You told me one time of another way to restore
I accidentally clicked up near the top of the screen, and it just all went away.
So let me, is it impede your ability to share the slides and talk about them?
No, I can go ahead and do that. I just can't see any of you at all. And I can't, yeah, usually I get a chance to see, the gallery view at the top of my screen and I can see you, but no, I can't. But
I would advise, I think we ought to just press on and know that we're with you.
I agree. No,
we can see your slides.
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
And you can just give me plenty of feedback if I'm missing visual cues, because you know that I can't actually see you now. Okay, so a month ago, this man disrupted the presidential race by announcing that he might run for president. And of course, immediately, both parties began to try to figure out, who was he going to hurt more, the Republicans or the Democrats? And though he's since withdrawn, one of the lessons there for that moment was to realize, who did he really hurt more by having to withdraw? Really, it's the voters who missed a chance to be able to have another option in the race, because of course we know with our current way of voting, anytime a third party candidate enters a race like that, they're going to be a spoiler, and that's of course one of the reasons why we're interested in ranked choice voting.
And it's not just in these high-profile presidential campaigns that we see this spoiler effect, right? It's not just Ross Perot or Ralph Nader from the 2000 election. We see it at our local races too. So in the Oregon governor's race of 1990, it's a classic example. You had three candidates here: the Democrat Roberts, the Republican Frohnmeyer, and then an independent candidate, Al Mobley, who was kind of to the right of Frohnmeyer, right? And so because there were two right-leaning candidates who were running, even though a majority of voters preferred someone who was right-leaning, 53%, essentially they split the vote amongst themselves and elevated Roberts to the victory. So in this case, vote splitting hurt the Republican Party, even though a majority of voters preferred someone who was right-leaning.
So Mohit, if I were a voter who really liked that independent candidate, Al Mobley, the best, he's my first choice, I've got a really hard decision. Do I actually vote for the one I like best and potentially throw the race to the candidate I like least? Or do I instead choose between the two front runners, whichever one I deem to be the lesser of the two evils, and vote for them? That's a dilemma that many voters have in our current way of voting.
That's right. It's a function of our current system. Now, a lot of people think in Washington state, we have it a lot better because we have a top two primary system. You no longer elect people with less than half the vote, right? Because in the general election, whoever wins, wins with a majority. However, all that does really is it pushes that problem down to the primary level. So look at this classic race, the Washington state treasurer's race from 2016. In this race, you kind of have the opposite issue cropping up. Here you have 3 Democrats running and 2 Republicans. Even though a majority of voters prefer someone who's a Democrat, in this case, almost 52%, because there's 3 candidates running from the left. Essentially, they split the vote 3 ways, and you have only 2 Republicans in the general election. Completely reduces choices and voices for voters in Washington state.
So here we have the ballot we had in March for the presidential primaries. And we vote by mail, and we really like to vote by mail. But we had 13 Democratic candidates when the ballots were mailed out. But by the time of the primary, most of them had dropped out. So early voters who voted for these candidates and mailed their votes in didn't get a second choice. So they had no say in the contest between Biden and Sanders. And so more than 25% of the votes went to candidates who had dropped out. And I know some of these voters, and they feel like their vote didn't count.
But these are some of the problems that we're experiencing in our democracy now. And today, even though more than 40% of the voters don't identify with either one of the 2 major parties, we are caught between, in this hyper-partisan time, with this choose one voting method that is driving this, this polarization, driving both sides further and further into the extremes. But we know our democracy is a work in progress, and we have the answer right here in the first 3 words of the Constitution for who needs to step up and take care of it when we find that our democracy isn't working as well as we want it to. And we've seen in the last couple of years more democracy reform movements than ever before in history that have been popping up from citizens and people all over the country. And we know with respect to voting that there is a better way to vote.
So ranked choice voting is a simple change to the way we vote. Instead of picking just one candidate, you can choose to mark first choice, second choice, and third choice. And if your first choice can't win, your vote automatically goes to your second choice.
Okay. So let's give it a try. This is a moment when Kit and I, if we were all, and Mohit, if we were all in the room together, we would be passing out a sample ballot. And we're going to try an election here in your imagination. So one of the things with a ranked choice election is that a candidate must have a majority to win. It's not like you can win back in the Oregon governor's race with 47% of the vote. So imagine now for a moment that this is your ballot. You're just receiving it. We're going to choose our favorite fruit out of these 4 choices. And you can just, if you've got pencil and paper, you can mark it down right now. Which one is your first choice? If you have a second choice, put that down. Third and fourth if you wish to. You can rank as many or as few as you wish. And again, when we are in person, we would now be coming around the room and collecting your ballots. And just a reminder that in a ranked choice election, you only cast your ballot once. You put your as many choices down as you wish, but you only turn in your ballot once. So we're going to start counting the votes now. And you could just see how easy it is as a voter in a ranked choice election. That's all you need to do. Rank your choices as many as you wish. That's all there is to it. Now what we're going to do is see what the election administrators do with the ballots on election night. So Kit, what is our first step?
The first step is to count the first choice votes.
Okay, we'll count everybody's first choice votes. And imagine if you were in the room with us, then this is the way we like to show it. So we would say to you, if you have orange as your first choice, would you please go over into that corner with all the people who voted same first choice for orange, and all the apple people, if your first choice is apple, you guys are over there, great people over there, and so on. We'll spread out around the room. We'll just have you stand with other people who voted for the same first choice. And let's imagine that there are 100 of us in the room now, and this is what we see. 30 of you with oranges, 40 with apples, and so on around the room. So Kit, sometimes with ranked choice elections, there's a winner right in the first round. Has that happened this time?
Someone would need to get 51 votes to be a winner in the first round, and Apple's ahead with 40, but that's not 51.
Yeah, good. So it's important just to note too that in a ranked choice election, if we have a majority winner right off the bat with first choices, then we don't ever need to look at anybody's second choice. But in this situation, no winner, no majority winner yet. So what do we do now?
Well, what we do now, the auditor eliminates the last place candidate, which is Strawberry with 10 votes. So Strawberry as a candidate is eliminated, no longer in the race. And those 10 ballots, then we look at who's the second choice on those 10 ballots.
Great. So if you're in the room with us and you're imagining what's happening now, the 10 of you who are over there with Strawberry's first choice, so you can think a minute, is that you? Are you somebody who had Strawberry first? If so, we're gonna invite you to move to your backup choice now. Your candidate, your first choice candidate isn't going to win, so that's out. You're not going to get your first choice, but your voice has not been eliminated in this election. So we'll see what happens, where those 10 people go.
And back in the first round, everyone else stays right where they are with their first choices.
Great, thank you. So now we've got 37 people over in the corner with oranges. Wow, 7 people went from strawberries to orange. Only 1 person moved from strawberries to apple. And then 2 are now added to the grape group. Do we have a winner yet?
We don't. Apple is still ahead. Orange picked up a lot of votes from Strawberry, so it looks like Orange was doing a great job of campaigning for those second choice votes. But
we're going to need to do another round, aren't we?
47, 41, and 22. We don't have 51.
And so next, what do we do? We
eliminate the last place candidate and look at those ballots and see what the next choice is for the people who are in the grape category now.
Good. Okay, let's see where they went. All right. So surprise, surprise, the lead actually changed, didn't it? Apple was ahead in the first and second rounds, but the lead has changed, and it looks as though Orange really did a great job of campaigning for second and third choice votes in this election. Now we picked an example where the lead switched. Most of the time in ranked choice elections, whoever is ahead in the first round does end up winning. That's the most common thing. But about 15% of the time, you'll see this happen. And in this case, we know that if the 100 people who are in the room with us today were given a choice only between oranges and apples, that a majority of them really do prefer orange. And one of the things to consider, because it is often the case that again, 85% of the time roughly, whoever's in the lead in the first round ends up winning the race. And you might wonder, well, what benefit is there from going through the extra rounds? Well, if you can imagine, if you're the person who's in the lead in the first round, you'll never, but you didn't have a majority. It's like there's a cloud over you if the election stops there. Like you just never know whether you really had a majority of support. So by going through the full round of ranked choice voting, then the winner really knows that they had the majority of support. Okay, so let's have a look at some benefits of voting this way.
So we could look at Justin Amash differently. Instead of as a spoiler, he could be someone who brings a broader conversation into the campaign, and if he was eliminated, he wouldn't be taking votes away from the candidate who he was closest to.
People could vote for him without wasting their vote, without feeling like they're throwing away their vote. This is a really interesting little example that just came up this last week or 2 weeks ago, May 21st. We spotted this news article in Virginia, where there's a hotly contested congressional race. These three Republicans are all vying for their party's nomination. They all want to run to try to unseat the Democrat incumbent in Congress. And they issued a joint statement calling on the Republican Party of Virginia to use ranked choice voting to pick the nominee, to pick which one of the three of them would be the strongest to go against the Democratic incumbent. And it's an interesting moment, because what they're basically saying is that none of them want to be like the apple in the previous election. That is to say, having the most votes, but not having the true majority. They want to make sure that their party puts forward the strongest candidate possible, because they care more about unseating that Democratic incumbent than they care about themselves winning the election. Really interesting.
One of the good things we're seeing from the many, many places that use ranked choice voting around the country is that it really, really increases choices for voters. You see more voice in your elections and you see a lot more choices. So one place that has been using it for a while is Minneapolis. If you just take a look at the mayoral race from 2017, you see a lot more women and a lot more people of color, both running in that election, in these elections, and winning seats. This could be for a multitude of reasons. It could be the fact that you no longer have that spoiler effect, right? You have candidates who can rest assured that they can run the race without throwing the election to somebody else. You don't face that pressure from within the party to drop out. You address that issue of electability. A lot of people say, can this person really win? Well, in a ranked choice election, that issue is no longer so pressing.
And another reason why we would see more choices in a ranked choice election, right now here in Washington, we always winnow the field down to just 2 candidates for the general election. There's no need to do that when you use ranked choice voting, because you can have a majority winner coming out of a wider field.
So ranked choice voting promotes civil issues focused campaigns, because candidates must appeal more broadly to get the 50% plus one. So there's much less motivation to smear their opponents, because they might need some second place votes to win. And here are 2 examples of candidates who were opponents, but they campaigned together. They had enough in common to campaign together, and they would ask the supporters to vote for one of them first and one of them second.
And it's worth fleshing this out a little bit. If you just imagine for a second that you're a candidate in a ranked choice election, as Kit said, it very much changes the nature of campaigning, right? Under our current system, if I go to my neighbor who has, let's say, a yard sign for my opponent, in the current system, I have no incentive to engage with that neighbor. I don't need to go to them and talk to them, because I know they're going to be voting for my opponent. But in a ranked choice election, I'm not only going to ask that neighbor, hey, okay, it's great, you're voting for someone else, but guess what? We align on XYZ issues. Maybe consider putting me down as a second or third choice. It incentivizes that candidates really take the time to reach out to more folks. And you can see how that also might affect turnout, because people are really more engaged throughout the entire process.
Another benefit of ranked choice voting, since it does make primaries unnecessary, many jurisdictions choose to eliminate primaries. They don't all, and it's not required, but most jurisdictions that use ranked choice voting do eliminate primaries, saving costs and essentially cutting their election costs in half. And just for reference, $100,000 is the cost. It happens to be, that's a data point that I have from Vancouver, Washington. New York City is looking forward to saving on the order of $20 million every time they eliminate a runoff election when they start using ranked choice voting in 2021. Candidates save on election costs too, because again, when primaries are eliminated, it means they only need to run 1 race instead of 2. So it costs less to run for office.
So folks, thus far, we've been talking about a very particular kind of race, ranked choice voting in single winner elections. What does that mean? That means, elections where you elect one winner, right? Whether it be the mayor, the governor, any one winner. The good thing about ranked choice voting, though, is it can be also used in multi-winner elections. You can think about a city council where there's, 9 candidates. You can think about posted positions, something like the Seattle Port Commission, where people run against arbitrary posted positions, right? Position 1, position 2, position 3. Instead of sort of running each of those races as head-to-head, you get to basically say, okay, let's do one high turnout ranked choice election, and the top 5 vote getters get all those seats. So let's think about an example. If you look at Cambridge, Massachusetts, it actually uses this very kind of ranked choice voting in a multi-winner election. They have a 9-member city council, right? So let's say that 3 of those seats are up in any kind of, in any one election year. Well, if there's 10 candidates running for 3 seats, instead of saying, okay, each candidate can say, I'm running for position 1, position 2, position 3, you say all those 10 candidates run, and the 3 highest vote getters essentially get the seats in that election. Now, because there are 3 seats, each candidate actually needs a little less than 1/3 of the vote to win. So it's really, what that does is it ensures proportional outcomes. It ensures that if you're 1/3 of the electorate, you can get feasibly 1/3 of the seats. Right now, what you have is a system that takes 51% of the voters who then get 100% of the representation, right? That means whether you're an issue group or a political group, if you are just 40% of the population, you get no representation. In those posted positions, if you're 40% of the population running in one district, well, you don't win that seat. It's in District 2, you can't win that seat either. But in ranked choice voting, you can see to win a proportional outcome in that way. There's also one other great benefit of this. Sorry, one more thing about the gerrymandering. Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, I heard one speaker say very, very poignantly that all lines are political. We are in a census year here in the middle of a pandemic, which means that next year will be that redistricting process here in Washington, where a group of folks get down together and draw lines to figure out how the districts are shaped. Well, that is only useful in a single winner election. When you have more than one candidate representing a district, let's say 3-4 people in one jurisdiction, it no longer becomes useful to basically manipulate lines and figure out how one person can just win one district. It makes elections more competitive, and it defeats gerrymandering. And the good thing about this, again, it's worth looking at it as a graphic, right? In the current system, you have 51% of the voters who can get all of the seats. We can all agree that a majority of the electorate should get to make the decisions, but a minority, whether it's 40%, 30%, 20%, they deserve some representation on an elected body. And this is being used not just in Cambridge, not just in East Point. There's actually an interesting case study happening right now in Yakima, Washington, where Yakima County is under the Washington Voting Rights Act facing a legal challenge, right? What they have, even though it's a county that's 48% Hispanic or Latinx, in its entire history, they've only elected one candidate of color to that county commission. So basically, they've been locked out of power for a long, long time. And what they are seeing is that if they were to switch to ranked choice voting, specifically multi-winner ranked choice voting, they're using that to basically get a remedy under the Voting Rights Act and get more holistic representation. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to this quote by this gentleman. In a democratic government, the right of decision belongs to the majority, but the right of representation belongs to us all.
Mohit just did a terrific job covering this topic, which we often will take a whole hour to delve into, and we're really happy to take some more time in Q&A. If that's your first time thinking about multi-winner races, congratulations if you made it through it. And again, we can go more deeply into it. It's a way of voting that we're not used to because we don't have any multi-winner races here in Washington State, but you will certainly be hearing more and more about them in the future. So at the end of the day, then, we look at these benefits of ranked choice voting. We haven't addressed all of them. We've just hit the high points. But this is what's really emerging, that good government groups around the country, across the political spectrum, are increasingly pointing to ranked choice voting as the most impactful and most achievable reform that we can implement now to democratize, depolarize our politics. Here, if you are thinking perhaps that it's more left-leaning folks who are in favor of ranked choice voting, it's not the case. Here's Stan Lockhart, former Utah State Republican Party chair, big fan of ranked choice voting, and he calls it the ultimate win-win. Ranked choice voting allows more choice. He likes the way his party can have a full debate and yet emerge with a majority support for the candidate that they're going to nominate. Incentives are there to reward candidates who can really unify a party. So he makes the case that ranked choice voting can really strengthen political parties. Voters in Utah have loved it. They used it in 2 states this last November in Utah and most recently at their state convention just about 3-4 weeks ago.
So the telegraph and our voting system. So other countries like ours, former British colonies, inherited the choose one voting method from England. And some, like Australia, New Zealand, and Ireland, have long since replaced it with preferential methods like ranked choice voting. So where is ranked choice voting used? 20 states use it in one way or another, a city or in their military and overseas ballots. The state of Maine, the entire state of Maine uses ranked choice voting. And down here you see presidential primaries this year in Alaska, Hawaii, Kansas, and Wyoming. And then cities across the country, including Minneapolis, Santa Fe, Cambridge, Oakland, San Francisco, and New York City just voted to begin using ranked choice voting. It's also used at the Academy Awards for the Best Picture, and Robert's Rules of Order recommends it for mail ballots.
It's covered it all.
Yeah. So who are the critics and what do they have to say? Well, people who know how to win in the current system are often not fans of changing it. Some of them are, but some of them are more cautious. And one of the criticisms that you will often hear from elected officials who are not so eager to change it is they'll say that ranked choice voting is too confusing for the average voter. We would be concerned if that were the case. It's not. Polling is showing, again, that many jurisdictions are using it now, have been using it for, San Francisco, I think, began in roughly 2004, I think. So it's been a while, and the data is all showing that voters, in fact, 85 to 90% of voters systematically report that ranked choice voting is either very easy or easy enough. Some elections administrators have concerns about ranked choice voting, just not about what voting method. The administrators in our state don't take a position on method, but making a change to a new method, they would want to be sure that they are that they have enough resources to upgrade their equipment, to train their staff, and to educate voters. So those are their concerns, and very legitimate concerns. And then fans of other voting methods can sometimes get into the weeds and arguing about benefits and of different methods. One of the things that the people who like other voting methods all agree on, though, even though they don't agree on the method that is best, they agree on which one is worst. And that's the one we're using. So virtually all of the supporters of other methods will get on board with the idea that the most important thing is to displace the current single winner plurality voting that we use in favor of a different method. And there is no organized opposition to ranked choice voting. We can go through, again, more questions on these topics if you have them. Almost to the end. So what are we doing, Fair Vote Washington, to bring ranked choice voting to Washington State? It's pretty exciting. And I think, Mohit, you were going to tell about this one.
Yeah, well, folks, we just spent 20 minutes talking to you about ranked choice voting. Naturally, the next question for such an engaged audience is, what do we do to bring it to Washington State? One of the things is the fact that in the legislature, we currently have what's called a local options bill. And it is exactly that. It's a permissive bill that says that any jurisdiction, whether it be a school board, a city council, that wants to use ranked choice voting, be able to do so. Currently under state law, jurisdictions are prohibited from using ranked choice voting, except for a few exceptions that I won't get into right now. But basically, if this bill were to pass, then those jurisdictions would be able to use it. We already are seeing a lot of interest from places like the Bellingham City Council, which passed a resolution saying we'd want to use ranked choice voting when we're able to do so. The other route that we're considering is the statewide ballot initiative. And we're thinking of doing that next year for the 2022 ballot. And that is basically a way to get ranked choice voting statewide in all offices. This is how Maine got ranked choice voting statewide.
And we'll be bringing about 5 new bills for ranked choice voting to the 2021 session in January, including one that would use ranked choice voting for our presidential primaries from now on. So finally, this is the last slide. If you're interested, you'd like to learn more, our website is there. You can write to us at info@fairvotewa.org. And I want to just ask Kit to talk a little bit about some of the things people can do who want to get involved, because Kit, this has been what you've done so beautifully in Bellingham, is get people involved.
My specialty was festivals and rallies and going to the farmers market and having in-person events at breweries and dessert places. So now we've all moved online, and so we're having lots of ranked choice voting 101s like this, and Lisa's doing a great job heading that up, and some advocacy trainings. We've done a mock election online before, and we could do that again. And we're talking to all the candidates who are running for office, over 800 across the state, asking them what level of support or of ranked choice voting they might be able to give. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll have that ready for the 6,000 plus people who are ranked choice voting supporters in Washington.
And I'll just underscore that the first step, if you like what you're hearing tonight and you'd like to add your voice as a supporter of ranked choice voting, simple thing, and we really appreciate it if you would take time to just go to our website, fairvotewa.org, and sign up. We really promise we don't spam you with email. I'm the one who writes the emails, and I don't have time to do a lot of them, once a month maybe, and you can always get off or tell us if you don't want to get emails. But by signing up, you add your voice and you let us count you when we go to the legislature, and that would really be a big help. So at this point, I will stop sharing, and we'd love to hear your questions.
Okay, now, as I said in the beginning, we would prefer to just use one method to keep it simple, but I see 4 people have put messages in the chat box. I don't know what to do with those, but from now on, in fact, do it now, click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen, and then the list of everybody who's here, your names, appears on the right. And then at the bottom, you'll see raise hand. And if you have a question or a comment, click on raise hand, and your name will go to the top in the order in which you clicked on raise hand. With the symbol of a hand will go to the top. Sorry, Lisa?
I just see that Art has a hand up.
Yeah.
Oh, and Valid's saying something. What, Valid?
I was going to say that Art has his hand up.
Okay, well, I'm not ready. I want to continue
Sorry.
with a few more instructions.
Patience.
So then when we're ready to go, after I finish giving a couple directions, people are always real eager to get going before they forget their question. I'll call on you, and Brad will spotlight your picture, and then go ahead and speak your question. Say your name if I haven't done so. And if there's an issue with your audio and you can't be heard, Zoom support will work with you off screen while we move on, and then you can raise your hand again later. Okay, so Art, you've got the first one.
Okay, my name's Art Huffine. I'm from Island County, so I'm not really in Fidalgo, but I've been a fan of Corinne and Fidalgo Dems for about 8 years now. I understand the benefit of ranked choice voting if there's multiple candidates running in a race. I truly get it, and I have 2 questions. One is it auditable to determine that there really were the majority of orange people, or is there some way to fudge the system when you're starting to go from 4 candidates to find the one with the majority? I understand that process. My second concern, and I guess it's a question, if we did away with primaries, then we'd basically do away with parties. And my understanding right now, and I admit to being an old white guy, I first got involved in politics when JFK was running for president, and I was a sophomore in high school. But right now, primaries are the party choosing their candidate to run in a general. And then the general may have more than two parties, but we are basically a two-party system. So ranked choice voting really doesn't work if there's only two people running. Does using ranked choice voting to do with primary basically eliminate the need for political parties?
Great question. I want to give space. Mohit, I can't see your face right there, but do you want to chime in on any of there, or shall I go first?
You can go first. I'll take number 2. I can chime in for that one.
Okay. In terms of the audits, ranked choice voting absolutely is auditable. Risk limiting audits are the gold standard now, and we haven't gotten there all the way yet in Washington, although Snohomish County did a pilot of them recently, and we know we're moving in that direction, and we know that ranked choice voting in the single winner version is definitely auditable with risk limiting audits as well. So no concerns there. There are no, and I'll just add that there's no election security issues that come in with ranked choice voting that aren't already present in any other method. So there's no heightened election security concerns. Again, they're auditable. They need to be auditing is so important. Ranked choice voting does really well with vote by mail. So there's no concerns come up in that area. It is true that the multi-winner ranked choice voting, currently the risk limiting audits are still being worked out, the mathematics of that. So that's an area that is developing for the multi-winner ranked choice. There's certainly, again, all ranked choice elections can also be hand counted. That's not a problem. Minneapolis hand counted their ranked choice voting elections for 6 or 8 years quite recently. In fact, I think they may, I just heard that they may still are doing that. I have to actually look that up, but it's quite, so does that fully answer your first question? Okay, so with respect to the parties, Mohit, do you want to dive in there?
Well, the only thing I was going to say was about the idea of just 2 candidates. The one thing in the local options bill that we do have for jurisdictions that don't want to get rid of the primary altogether, we do have the option for a jurisdiction to say, okay, well, we'll do a top 5 primary, because we feel that that really provides more choice to voters rather than just 2 candidates. So use a ranked choice election to get the top 5 folks who then advance to the general election. So that's also an option rather than doing away with the primary altogether.
All right, let me just say one thing, and then I bet there's some folks who are in the room with us who might have some more comments, but I would suggest that here in Washington, because we have already eliminated the role of the parties in choosing the nominee. Anybody can run. I mean, witness the number of candidates for Republican governor right now. The Republicans are groaning. They don't want to seat all those candidates, but anybody can run in Washington state, and anybody can declare themselves to be a member of any party. The parties have no ability to winnow that or to be a gatekeeper. So that's sort of, we've already kind of crossed that threshold. In the state of Maine, they've kept their partisan primaries. They have a Democratic primary and they have a Republican primary, and they conduct those with ranked choice voting. So every state conducts their elections differently. It's so fascinating to see all the different variations. But the role of parties is not going away. There are a lot of people who would love to carry the banner of destroy the 2-party system, done with that. And some of those people are the most vocal opponents of ranked choice voting, because they say ranked choice voting isn't going to destroy the 2-party system. And they're right, it won't. It does, however, open the door for non-establishment candidates to be able to have people vote for them without feeling that they're throwing away their vote, and to be able to make it to the general election. Here in Washington, we virtually never see anything but a Republican and a Democrat emerge to our general elections. If others have comments, I'm sure that.
Yeah, I do. I want to. Yeah. Is this backwards or forwards? Is that
That's
backwards?
right. That's good.
Okay. David Brooks has written an article. It's a couple of years old, but it's a really good discussion on how ranked choice voting could help the parties, help them have more diversity within the party. At one point, he said several years many years back, there were like 2 branches of the Democratic Party and 2 branches of the Republican Party. So we really had 4 parties, and more voices could be represented in that way. We had moderate Republicans and conservative Republicans. We had moderate Democrats and liberal Democrats. And because of the voting method that we use, it divides the middle a little more out to the edges, and it means that there are voting blocks that in different areas that dominate the party.
Kit, I think you might be thinking about the 2-party doom loop. Is that possible?
No, I am thinking about Lee Drutman as well, but David Brooks is
okay. He addressed it in that article too.
A shorter article, and I recommend it.
So I just dropped that. The 2-party doom loop, I think is the right title of this.
Yes, that's right.
That addresses the same issue that Kit was just speaking about. Really worth reading. Excellent book.
All right, Casey has had his hand up, and I don't know it doesn't give your last name. It says Casey Pad Air. I'll unmute you here, and
hi, it's Melinda Casey.
Oh, hi Casey, that's who it is.
That's who it is, it's me.
Go ahead.
I just have a quick question. You said there's other types of reforms for voting. Does every state have to do the ranked choice voting, or any other state would choose? Everybody's eligible for their votes to count, I guess.
Well, one of the things, our Constitution makes it very clear that the elections are totally up to the states to figure out how they want to do that. So every state has its own autonomy. And there are various alternative voting methods. We think of ours as being the standard, that choose one that we inherited from England so long ago. And then in addition to that, ranked choice voting is certainly the most prevalent one.
Gotcha.
Other voting methods have never actually been used in public elections. So they're all, if you think about ranked choice voting, was invented more than 100 years ago and has been used for more than 100 years in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, all around this country. Other voting methods are decades, if not centuries behind in terms of sort of being tested out and being ready for prime time. But there are some states, Fargo, North Dakota is about to try one of the untested methods in 2021. They're going to try a method called approval voting, and we will find out how that goes.
Yeah, okay. And it doesn't matter whether it's you're sending in your vote, you're mailing in your vote, or voting in a booth somewhere, right?
You can imagine how compatible ranked choice voting really is with mail-in ballots, because you have a chance on a ranked ballot, you have an opportunity to have more say when you vote. You don't have to just stop after having picked your first choice. You can decide which is your second and which is your third. And so that's more conducive to having some time at home at your kitchen table with your computer and do a little research and see if you can figure out how many you want to rank.
Okay, Carol Sullivan has had her hand up.
Yes.
For a comment or question. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. I learned last night, Lisa, that the opposition to 1722, which is the House bill that's been in the works for a couple of years, might come from the county auditors who would like to see one system throughout the state, which makes sense. And if you've already answered this, please forgive me. My cat's been making me put her in and out. Would the ballot initiative limit the option to just ranked choice voting?
Let me see if I can lay that out a little bit. Great question. So Carol was on a presentation last night, and we had a county auditor with us from Skagit County. Suddenly forgot her name. Yes, right. So we were just speaking briefly about the fact that the auditors, the Washington State Association of County Auditors, has come out opposed to our local options bill. And what they say is that they don't take a position on what voting method it is, but whatever method we use, they want it to be uniform election law statewide without having local jurisdictions being using different methods. We understand and we respectfully disagree. Again, we have more than 20 states are using ranked choice voting now, And in many of those states, local jurisdictions are using ranked choice voting where the rest of the state is not. And so solutions to being able to do that are well tested. So we don't have a concern with that. It is also the case that auditors will tell you two things. Number one is they'll say, well, we're in favor of uniform election law. And then they and other lawmakers will also say, well, until we could try it somewhere in Washington state, we don't want to go for it statewide. So it's a catch-22. And you can see the difficulty with that. The legislation we're preparing for the coming session includes the local options bill, which we continue to feel is quite critically important. We think it would be best for Washington state voters to get a chance to see ranked choice voting working here in a city, in a town, in a county, somewhere in the state where the voters decide they want to try it and give it a full test so we can see how that works here. So the local options bill continues to be a priority for us. As I said, a bill for using ranked choice voting in presidential primaries beginning in 2024. A bill for using ranked choice voting for all statewide offices, state legislature, governor, all of those statewide offices, treasurer, et cetera. A bill for using ranked choice voting for federal offices, for Congress, House and Senate. And a bill that would do all of the above, a sort of an omnibus bill. Those are ones we're working on. And the one that we would bring to a ballot initiative would likely be the one that combines all. We'll have to continue to strategize depending a little bit on how it does in the legislature in 2021 in January. We'll be making a decision on what exactly the ballot initiative would be. Because of course, if we can pass legislation, that's great. And then we don't have to do the whole ballot initiative thing because it's expensive, it's difficult. It's basically going over the heads of the legislature to do a ballot initiative, and we won't do that unless we need to. But what we do understand is that while legislators are really pretty happy to consider the local options bill, it has a lot of support. But they're basically, if they pass that, they're basically saying, yeah, you other guys, you city council members, you school board members, you other people at local races, you guys can try ranked choice voting, but don't change the way we were elected. They're not super excited about changing the way they were elected. So it's very unlikely we could pass legislation that would change the way our state legislature was elected without going to a ballot initiative. Does that make sense? Does that answer?
Yeah, and I'm kind of wondering how Maine went about it.
Maine is just a fascinating story. If anybody knows that, I'll tell it super fast. Maine had experienced 9 of their most recent 11 governors being elected with less than a majority because of vote splitting. They have a strong tradition of independent candidates running and becoming a spoiler, splitting votes with Democrats. It happens in that state. And then the Republican gets elected with 35% of the vote. And they were just done with it. Maine voters really saw it over and over. They would have the vast majority of the voters would have the last choice candidate would get elected to be governor. And so they understood how vote splitting was thwarting the wishes of the majority. They did a statewide ballot initiative in 2016 that passed to use ranked choice voting. The legislature immediately blocked it. And people were spitting mad. And they went out in the dead of winter, January and February 2017, I guess that would have been. And they did what's called a people's veto, where they had to go out and gather signatures again to override the legislature. And they were resoundingly successful. They gathered way more signatures than they had. People were so angry. So in June of 2018, finally they were able to use ranked choice voting for the first time. And I'm shortening the story because there were multiple times when it became a partisan issue in Maine. And it was the Republican Party that went all the way to the Supreme Court trying to block it. Last minute, they finally were able to use it in Maine in June of 2018. And then in the general election in November of 2018, they used it. And then advanced it actually one more step, and they passed a law to use it in the presidential election coming up. And right now, what's happening in Maine, does anybody know? The Republican Party is gathering signatures again to block it, to block the November use of ranked choice voting in the presidential election. So it's just been a dogfight in Maine. It continues to be. The vast majority of the voters support it. It's passed by large margins, and it's sort of been larger every time. So it's just going to be fascinating to keep watching. But Maine is a party where, it is a state where the Republican Party in this case has been able to maintain minority rule because of vote splitting. And they're not going to let go easily. But it's not a partisan issue, because there are other places where Democrats have been able to maintain power because of vote splitting and have minority rule. So it really doesn't benefit one party or the other. But what you find is that whichever party is in control in an area generally doesn't want to support ranked choice voting because they're just not excited to change.
Okay, let's go on. Patty Santangelo has her hand up. You probably have a comment.
I have a comment. I remember hearing one of my earlier meetings here that the military has used it for their mail-in ballots for a long time. Is that correct?
That's right. Kit, do you want to tell about that?
That is correct. In that map, there were 5 states in the South that use ranked choice ballots for military and overseas, because they don't know if they're going to have a runoff or not when they have their election. It's different than Washington, where we have a primary. And so if they're going to have a runoff, then they have to invite people to come back to the polls, and there's not time to print and send more ballots out to the military. So they vote once. Yeah. They just vote the once. And if there's a runoff, they can look at the ballot and see what their choice would have been for the runoff.
Does that make sense, Patty? Yeah. And it works really well. They've been doing it for years.
Okay, Jim Byron's got his hand up.
Yes,
go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Corinne. My question may seem a little different, but I can imagine that if you have 6, 7, 8 candidates running for one position, and you're going to use ranked choice voting, then do you have to rank all of them, or can you get by with ranking only half of them and still be accurate at the end of the day? The idea that brings this is that people, when they go to vote, they concentrate on 1 or 2 people, and they come to all these other names, and they want to throw up their hands and say, "Out of heck with it! I'm not going to do this because I don't know any of these people." What kind of comments do you have on that particular scenario?
It's certainly possible to just vote for one candidate and turn in your ballot and call it good. And usually it doesn't take very many rounds of counting to determine a winner. So if you ranked 3 candidates out of 7, you know, you'd have really given your voice there. You may only like 3 of the candidates. So
in Australia, they actually require people to rank every candidate. Isn't that interesting? You get fined if you don't.
Really?
You have to vote. You're required to vote, and you're required to rank them all. Here in this country, we don't make you rank them all. Essentially, you know, if you think about 2 places that have 2-round elections, like here in Washington, we have a primary and then a general. And as Kit mentioned, some of those southern states have a general election, and then if they don't have a majority winner out of the general, they'll have a runoff. So those places that use 2-round elections like that, we don't require voters to participate in both rounds, right? Somebody can show up in the first round, and then if they don't like the choices that emerge for the second round, they can abstain. It's the same in a ranked ballot. You can just vote for as many as you're interested in. If you get to the point where like you don't know or you don't care, then you can just stop there. And it generally is, just as Kit said, 3 choices, 3 to 5 choices is usually plenty to make sure that your voice is going to get to the final round. If you want to guarantee that your voice will be heard in the final round, then you do need to rank them all.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's all the hands that are up. Does anybody else have a question or a comment that comes to mind now? It's your last chance. Anyone? Oh, Billy does.
Corinne, I'm sorry, I couldn't raise my hand.
Say your whole name, Billy.
Right.
Billy Seyfettin.
Right, I'm sorry. I'm Billy Seyfettin, and I call this. I'm wondering the mechanics of the whole thing. Do you think like the voting machines will be able to be adjusted to do all of these, all the math?
It's a really, really good question. And this is where we're so lucky here in Washington. I don't know, we haven't mentioned that in 2008 and 2009, Washington State actually was one of the first states to use ranked choice voting very briefly in Pierce County, Washington. And back in those early days, the election administrators actually had to write all the code to do the tabulation. And it was really expensive and it was really difficult. And they decided when it became an option to use top 2, they just decided they were done with ranked choice voting. They were going to use top 2 like the rest of the state. But at this point now, more than 10 years later, you saw the map with all the places around the country that are using ranked choice voting. So the voting machine vendors have at this point developed software that is absolutely available. So all of those solutions are available now. So that's the good thing about being in Washington's position. We're no longer leading the way, so we can follow all the best practices and all the things that have been developed. And right now, if you want to just a tiny bit more, I could say we have 39 counties. It's either 35 or 36 of them. I actually need to get updated, but all but 2 or 3 have hardware that can be used in ranked choice elections. And all of the counties would need software upgrades. And the vendors of the various vendors all are either in the process of developing them or have developed them. So it's not as easy as pie, but it's pretty easy. It wouldn't be free, but it would be close to, it would be modest costs. The state of Maine spent $100,000 to bring ranked choice voting statewide 2 years ago. So that's the order of cost that we would be looking at.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, I guess then we'll conclude for the evening if there aren't any more. Billy, you've got another one.
Casey, go ahead. Casey, you can unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh yeah, I see your hand now. Go ahead, Casey.
No, I just have a quick question regarding what do we do now? If we go online to fairvotewashington.org, is there going to be money involved that you want from us, like all of the political stuff, or is it just if you want a count of heads?
Well, you could, of course we want your money. That helps a lot.
Silly question.
But really, truly, the most important thing is to be able to count your voice.
Okay.
So sign up is the very first request. If you want to be involved, if you want to get involved, when you sign up, they'll ask you if you want to volunteer, if you want to get involved. There's all kinds of things to do. As Kit, I think, was mentioning, we're contacting candidates who are running right now. We have volunteers all over the state who are reaching out to those candidates. It's fun work. Kit's volunteering. She does these talks. There are a lot of things to do if you want to do that. And if you want to give us some money, you can do that really easily on the website too. Thank you for mentioning.
Thank you.
If you can think of partner organizations we can connect with, we have formed a coalition to bring ranked choice voting to Washington State because it takes more than one organization to bring it. We've been staunch allies. We're fortunate because a lot of groups like yourselves are very excited about this reform as well. So if you can think of groups that would be interested in joining us, please let us know. We're happy to do these presentations and bring them on board with us as well.
Actually, Mohit, I'm so glad you mentioned the coalition. That's brand new, and you're at the helm of that. Could you just say a couple more things about the coalition and who's joined so far?
Yeah, so this is really about bringing on a host of partner organizations to say, you know what, we're interested in bringing ranked choice voting to Washington State. We have a lot of interest from different organizations around the state. So we have right now the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle that's on board with our coalition. We have the India Association of Western Washington, South Asian Americans Together for Washington, and we also have APACE, which is a civic empowerment organization that's very interested. So we're really seeing a lot of interest from across a cross-section of groups, not just in King County, but outside King County as well. And I'm really interested, especially to look at labor unions that may be interested, the Washington Education Association, different groups, different unions in particular. So if you have groups in mind that we can connect with, please let me know. You can connect with us at info@fairvotewa.org, and I'll put that in the chat as well.
And Mohit, I know Mohit would particularly love to hear from you if you are a member of a labor union or know someone who is, because we'd love to speak with you about how to get a chance to speak with your leadership.
Carol Sullivan wants to say one more thing. Go ahead, Carol.
Yes, I just wanted to also put in a little plug for Fixed Democracy First, the documentary called Slay the Dragon, which is something I think that Corinne might be interested in for a program event. But on June 30th, there's a Zoom event, and Slay the Dragon, when I looked at it when it was at the Lincoln as part of their quarantine cinema, I thought it was something for kids, like Train Your Dragon or, you know, whole kids series. No, it's not. It's for us because it talks about gerrymandering and what we need to do, be aware of it, and perhaps how we can effect some change there, because these two things go along hand in hand, I think, towards making our democracy stronger and our voting more accessible to people, everyone. Thank you.
Plus, it's just a great film. Totally gripping, wonderful story. You would love it. I just put a little bit in the chat there. You can look it up on our website. We're going to be co-hosting it on June 30th. And it's free.
Thank you.
And what length is it?
It's a full-length film.
Full length.
Hour and a half.
And where will it be?
It'll be free streaming, right? It'll be a webinar, essentially, just like this. You just register for it and you get to sit back in your couch and enjoy it right there. And Cindy Black of Fixed Democracy First will be hosting it. And I think Mohit and I don't know who exactly will be on the panel, but we're co-hosting with them. It's just a wonderful, uplifting story of how citizens in Michigan, just in 2018, took hold of the process for drawing the district lines in their state and wrested it from the control of the legislature. And now they're just getting ready, 2020, to have the first citizens commission. Now it's going to be drawing the lines there. And talk about a fight. I mean, that was even a bigger fight than in Maine that I was telling you, really. It's a well-told story. A lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much. Anything else? Somebody else started to say something. What was that? Somebody else? No, I guess not. Okay. Well, Lisa, you did great, even though you lost your video. And Kid,
I actually got it back. You might have been able to tell. I got it back.
No,
I'm sorry. I got all nervous there when I couldn't see you.
I know you did, but and you all did great. So if people want to applaud, see the reactions at the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side.
Yeah. Oh.
Click there, and the chat, the hands come up for clapping. You can clap there.
You can save the chat by clicking on the 3 dots at the bottom of the chat. It'll save it to your computer. Because you don't miss anything that was put out.
Yeah, because in there's information about Slay the Dragon, and also the Fair Vote Washington website is in the chat box too. So thanks to our speakers and to the Zoom support people and to all the participants who came. And next month, we're going to have on Tuesday, July 14th at 7 p.m. Fidalgo Democrats will have a limited candidates forum. It will be limited to just the county commissioner races. There's 2 races. And we're not inviting the Republican, just Democrats. And we invited 2 independents, one of whom accepted. So please join us then. You'll get an invitation with the details. All right, those who are on the list. Thank you and good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.